Good morning, friends and colleagues. I don't know if you could just take your seat, then we can start. But thank you so much for being here. This is the beginning of what is going to be a very, very busy week, and we thought we'd take advantage and do a first cut at this and talk about women and girls. How about that one? So my name is Sophia Borges, and I am the Senior Vice President here at the UN Foundation, and so I wanted to welcome you to our event, Power in Her Voice, Reimagining a Gender Equal Future. So we meet today on the eve of the Summit of the Future, a summit which is meant to bring about renewed commitment towards global cooperation and a multilateral system that is effective in safeguarding our future. However, we will not achieve that vision unless we place young people at the center of these efforts. Ultimately, success will be measured on how the lives of young people, particularly young women and girls, around the world are transformed for the better. Today's event is co-hosted, is being organized by UN Foundation, and in particular our Future Agenda program, which provides a platform for young people to reimagine the UN for the 21st century needs. This intergenerational dialogue is also led by our UNF Next Generation Fellows, who are also here and very determined to ensure that the girls' demands shape the future. With the Summit of the Future and key milestones like Beijing +30 next year, dialogues like this are vital to turning these demands into real action. So we're joined by 17 remarkable girls and women, leaders from every corner of the world, like Joan Kambabzi from Uganda. Joan, are you in the room or you might be in the back? Hey. who has been fighting to end child marriage since she was a teenager. And then we have Roya Mahbub. Where are you, Roya? Are you in the room? Hello, good morning. Who is Afghanistan's first tech CEO and named Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in 2013 for connecting high schools to the internet in Afghanistan. Both these change makers have led inspiring careers, and all generations, young and old, can look up to them with hope for the future. So we are not alone in this effort, and I wish to recognize our partners in the Unlock the Future Coalition, including Girl Up, Impact Afghanistan, and Brown University and Digital Citizen Fund for helping us bring this event together. So with those words, I wanted to introduce two leaders who will be kicking off today's conversation. One of them, who we will hear from, is Her Excellency Ambassador Christina Marcus Larsen. She is the permanent representative of Denmark to the United Nations, and she will take up her seat in the Security Council in January. So another female leader in the multilateral system. And she will be followed by Ms. Rina Amiri, the US Special Envoy for Afghan women, girls, and human rights. So, without further ado, let me invite Ambassador Christina Marcus Larsen to provide her remarks. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sophia, and good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be here this morning, this event has such an inspiring lineup of women and girls, and we just heard about some of them. We are all just amazed by what you've been doing. As Sophia is saying, we're really just kicking off that whole week now that some of us call Crazy Week, but that's just because we're so crazy busy, but also because it's really, really exciting. And of course, today marks the days of actions just starting, so this is really, at least for me, the first event that I'm in, and I think I can't think of a better way than to kick off this really once-in-a-generation summit that the company of these young women leaders that are advocating one of the most critical issues of our time, a gender-equal future. And just when you say that word, it sounds almost like something that at least used to be science fiction, and clearly, unfortunately, it's not reality today, but it could be reality. It could be reality in our lifetime, and at least it could be reality in your lifetime, I think. So let's continue working for that. Because it is, of course, beyond all discussion that without the full achievement of all human rights for all women and girls, we simply cannot achieve the objective that we hopefully hope to set out in the Pact of the Future and that we agreed to in the 2030 Agenda. And when I say hopefully, it's because the Pact of the Future, as you might know, the negotiations are still not over. In principle, all our heads and states of state and government are going to approve the pact on Sunday, but there are negotiations. There's still a few countries who have broken silence. We are 175 countries who are actually happy with the pact as it is now, but there's still a few countries who have broken, so we hope to negotiate it further and finalize it hopefully today, I hope, or like hopefully any minute. Because, of course, we have been working on this pact for months. There's always compromises, but we have at least worked towards a pact where we ensure that it mainstreams gender across all the 5 chapters. This is a big document with 5 different headlines, but we really have just aimed to mainstream gender and gender equality into all of that. So that's extremely important. Hopefully we'll succeed today or before Sunday morning at least. So we're looking forward to this, but also, of course, there's going to be another important event coming up, which is the commemoration of the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action. So all of that is going to happen now and something we'll all be working on. And that's so important because we're, of course, in a time right now where we see this really intense pushback on women's and girls' rights across the world. I can tell you, I think it's no secret that has also been a major theme when we've been negotiating the pact. We feel that pushback all the time in all the negotiations here at the UN. So it is more critical than ever that we give space for the voices of those fighting for a better future, for, of course, their mothers, sisters, daughters, and themselves, like everyone here in this room and like so many women around the world. So this event is about a gender equal future, as I mentioned, and that, of course, for all of us all over the world, and not just for Afghanistan, but I still think it's very fitting that we actually have a special focus on Afghanistan here today, while we're here in New York City and celebrating all our hopes and dreams for how we want to change the future and work towards a gender equal future. We have a situation in Afghanistan where women and girls, their situation has, of course, drastically deteriorated since Taliban's takeover 3 years ago. Of course, we already have a deteriorating economic and humanitarian situation, but also, as everyone here knows, women and girls have seen during this year many of the most fundamental human rights being breached, including something that we all take so much for granted, the right to education, the right to employment, all of that severely restricted. So the situation in Afghanistan, and that's why, of course, why we have to focus on it, it does represent one of the most serious women's rights crises in the world, and this crisis is steadily deepening. I think you've all heard of the introduction of this new law by the Taliban a couple of months, I think it was in August, called, in the English version at least, propagation of virtue and prevention of vice. I don't know, for me it sounds like something from Harry Potter, but at least I don't barely know what that means. But all of that, what's in that law, of course, is, again, tons of examples of some deeply conservative developments that we can only condemn the strongest way possible. If this law is to be implemented, the law will, of course, further erase Afghan women from public space and force them into deepest isolation. And I'm sure others would talk more about that after me here today. It's also clear, as we will hear about today, that Afghan women are not ready to give up or lose hope. Many of them are still putting their lives on the line, facing surveillance, harassment, assault, detention, torture, or exile. We have Roya here speaking to us later, looking forward to that, in the fight for a dignified life. So we have the honor today to hear some of them, and I think that's going to be really the real interesting part here. I'm sure all of your story represent a story of resilience, courage, and hope. And that's, of course, why Afghan women, you deserve the international community's full support. How we in the international community stand up for women in Afghanistan is going to set the precedents for gender equality in other places of the world where women's rights are challenged. Because, as I was just alluding to before, it's beyond Afghanistan also. Communities, unfortunately, face a global backlash and repressive developments for many women's girls around the world. So the girls that Afghan women and girls are fighting is now a fight for the women and girls so many other places of the world, including in places like Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. And as Sophia was just mentioning, my country, Denmark, we've been elected to the Security Council. Very humbled by this. We are entering 1st of January. And when we enter that council, we will remain committed to work, of course, with fellow member states on the council, but also so many other stakeholders in civil society to raise the concerns and support human rights, including, of course, the full, equal and meaningful participation of women at all levels. Women, peace and security will be a key priority. It's one of our 3 main priorities for our Security Council membership, and we're going to work as hard as we can to amplify the voices of women and girls. So I hope that this event can reaffirm our continued and steadfast commitment to women in Afghanistan and beyond. We need to leverage the Beijing Plus 30 platform to safeguard the standards and agreements that we have committed to, and forge ahead for all women and girls across the globe at a time where we're really feeling a pushback to all of these standards that we have achieved. So with these words, I'm not sure, Sophia, if I'm supposed to introduce, but otherwise I'll be very happy to pass on the floor to the U.S. Special Envoy of Afghan Girls and Women, Reena Amiri. Thank you so much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's so wonderful to be here, to start the morning with a group of women leaders and future leaders. It's an honor to be here with you today. We are gathered at an extraordinary time where education, advances in technology, and the determination and hard work of generations of women leaders and advocates have led girls in many parts of the world to recognize that there's no barrier to their dreams. At the same time, women and girls in societies in many parts of the world are seeing efforts to roll back their rights and send them back to a regressive past. Nowhere is this more evident than in Afghanistan, which many of us see as the worst situation in the world for women and girls. Afghanistan has never been an easy place for women and girls. But Afghan women made tremendous progress over 2 decades. It was their work. We stood behind them, but it was their leadership that was behind this progress. That all came to a halt when the Taliban took power 3 years ago. And a policy that we characterize as gender persecution, they have, as Ambassador Lawson noted, they have created an unlivable situation for women and girls. They have enacted over 70 decrees targeting women and girls' rights, with the latest law, which has many names. One of the, also the so-called morality law, which seems to not be very moral. It is the extent of the restrictions is just extraordinary. As an Afghan woman, you do not have the right to education. Your daughters, you see their frustration and their heartbreak. You as a woman with tremendous skills to offer your country have to sit at home. Now with this latest morality law, their voices, literally, they are told that they should not be speaking up in public. I think it shows the extent to which the Taliban are terrified of the power of women's voices. If these extreme policies are implemented in the way that the Taliban envision, it will strip Afghan women and girls from public space. Afghan women and girls have faced these restrictions with resistance, extraordinary courage, and creativity. Despite the extreme situation they face, they do not want the world to see them as victims. They want us to stand with them, to treat them as leaders, to recognize their dreams and potential. They want us to expend our political capital to support them, to invest in their talent and leadership through women-centered funding and programmatic support, and to recognize and reward the fact that they are not just fighting for their rights, but for the rights of women everywhere. They ask us to stand firmly with them and make clear to the Taliban that they will not achieve their goals until these draconian policies against women and girls and other vulnerable groups have been removed. There is a role for each of us, you as global citizens, governments, civil society, the private sector, NGOs. We all have a role to play in addressing the calls of women and girls in Afghanistan. As the US government, we are deploying an all-tools approach and working across all of these sectors. We are using our diplomatic tools to push for the reversal of these extreme decrees and to mobilize the international community to stand with Afghan women and girls. We also use our assistance tools and our public-private platforms to support and mobilize assistance for education, training, and employment support through virtual tools and hybrid tools. We recognize that we need to match the courage of Afghan women, not just through statements and words, but through concrete and meaningful support. In a moment, you are going to have the privilege of hearing from Roya Mahbub and of getting the glimpse of the extraordinary, awe-inspiring determination and talent of Afghan women and girls when we watched this film trailer. I've had the privilege of meeting these girls in Qatar, and I cannot tell you how moved I was and how hopeful it left me. Their work exemplifies the potential, vision, and resolve of all Afghan women and girls. For decades, we have seen Afghanistan through the lens of poverty and war. The Afghan Dreamers, this is the name of the film, and I think this really so beautifully captures what the spirit of these women are. They show a dramatically different future for Afghanistan, different than anything that we've seen in the last 40 plus years of conflict. But it can only be realized if we stand with the women and girls of Afghanistan. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for being here and watching our trailer of the film. And I'm Roya Mahbub. I'm a CEO and a co-founder of the Digital Citizen Fund, which is a nonprofit organization based in New York. And what we are doing is to try and empowering young women and children in developing countries, but specifically in Afghanistan, to get access to education and technology. And for me, it's a pleasure to have Aida and Nilab here in the stage, and we would like to welcome you to be here. And we wanted to hear from both of them about their experience and insights about the time that they spent in Afghanistan, but also what they are doing today here. I would like to first ask questions. My question is mostly for Aida, because we still have to watch, we already watched the film. So Aida, can you please introduce yourself and tell us about your story? How did you join the Afghan Dreamers, and what was the driving force for you to join this initiative? And what was your background before, and you can tell us more about the Dreamers.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm sorry, I got emotional watching that. Thank you. Thank you, appreciate it. So my name is Aida Haidarpour, and I'm a former member of the Afghan Girls Robotics team, and right now a junior majoring in computer science at Virginia Tech. My journey as an Afghan dreamer, thank you. My journey as an Afghan dreamer, as most of people's stories starts as they were a kid. And when I was a kid, I was born and raised in a family of almost all doctors. And obviously, my parents wanted me to become a doctor. But I've always found myself interested more in math and technology and innovation. And I've always dreamed about a limitless world, that I wanted to live in a world of technology and be surrounded by people working in technology. And as I was a kid, I asked my dad for a gaming console. And he got me that console, and I started playing with that console for days and nights, and I had lots of questions about that. And unfortunately, at that time, there was no one to ask those questions. So I had those questions forever. And then suddenly I came across the Afghan girls robotics team. They were working on different robots, different competitions. They were representing Afghanistan in a different way. And it was the first initiative in Afghanistan that girls had access to engineering. They had access to robots and devices, as you have seen in the trailer. And at that time, I was really interested and passionate about that, because I was thinking that finally I might find the answers to my questions. So I first decided to join the game development team. I first joined as a member, and then I became the captain. And as a captain of the team, we have worked with 2D games, 3D games, AR and VR. And the main purpose was to represent Afghanistan in the gaming industry too. And fortunately, we have built our first game in Farsi, and the theme was traditional and Afghanistan-based, back in 2020, which COVID was happening. And then I decided to be a programmer for the team, because I found myself interested into coding portion of the robots, and actually I could see the robots moving and actually seeing them physically, which was such an interesting thing for me. So I joined the robotics team. We have worked on different robots, different devices. Our projects, they were divided into 2 sections. We had the community-based projects, and also we had the competitions. For the community ones, we were really trying to solve the problems in our community, such as the ventilator that we have worked on during COVID. And the governor of Herat, they actually asked our team and a few of other teams to work on a ventilator, and fortunately ours was in the process of approving before the fall of the country. And then we could see people's perspective changing towards women in STEM and technology. And then we have also been working on robots for the competition, such as the first global competition. That was really significant and a fulfilling experience for me to be a part of it, and it definitely shaped my future and opened the doors for me. And I grow as a person, and also I achieved so many of my dreams that I have as a kid.
Thank you, Aida.
Thank you.
Can you tell us more about the people's and community's reaction to you and towards your team, or the Afghan Dreamers?
Sure. So in the beginning, as I was a member of an all-girls robotics team in a male-dominated field, in a conservative and traditional community, it had its own challenges, and it was not that easy. However, moving on, as we were working more, people could see our progress that we made. People could see that how women can be engineers and scientists too. We have received the support and encouragement from people locally and globally. From local communities, we could see more girls being more interested into STEM and to engineering. We could see more girls joining our team, which was a big mission of DCF or the Afghan Dreamers, that we could have more women in STEM. And globally, as we were participating into different competitions and conferences, it was such a nice experience and a wonderful moment for us, each and every one of me and the team members, that we could represent Afghanistan not as a country of war, not as a country of poverty, however, as a country of technology, as a country of creativity and innovation. That was such a big goal that we were aiming for, and fortunately, in the past few years or recent years, we have received that, and we could see more people being more interested into STEM. And towards the end of my time in high school, Afghan Dreamers, they had the mission to build the first STEM school in Afghanistan, that we could have more scientists, we could have leaders, we could have policymakers and change makers, and women in STEM in Afghanistan more. And the curriculum was based on design in the US. We had the structure of the school designed by Yale University, which was at that time, I was just a high school student. It was such a big dream for me. And I've never thought that I'll be here today. and talk about all of this. But however, unfortunately, in 2021, after the fall of the country, I was a senior at high school. I was one of those people who got banned from going to school. I was one of those people who did not have access to go to any kind of education. And fortunately, with the help of Qatar government, we got out of and we got evacuated to Qatar. And at the time, I was the captain of the team as we were participating into the first global competition. We could see how everyone and all the girls were disappointed because we did not know what was happening and what was going on. However, when we got to Qatar, I was thinking to myself that we need to keep the team together because it doesn't matter how the situation is going to be. It doesn't matter that what the Taliban are doing, but we have one mission to represent Afghanistan in the first global competition, not as a country that women are not allowed to go to schools, but as a country that women can be engineers, they can be scientists, and they can work with robots. And that was successful mission. We won the Judges Award amongst 175 countries, which was really nice experience for me and everyone, and we were so proud. And at that time, we were thinking to ourselves, and we were promising other students who were back in Afghanistan that we are going to work towards this. We are going to make a change and be your voices and represent Afghan women and girls in different places with a different perspective, because in the recent years, we could see more women into leadership roles, being policymakers, being change makers. And what we are hoping for is to see those progresses again in Afghanistan, and that's why we are not losing hope and we are continuing and moving forward.
Thank you, Aida.
Thank you.
I would like to turn to Nilab. Nilab is a recent graduate from Brown University, and she's advocating for social justice, and she's also Afghan. Nilab, could you please tell us about your experience, both during the 2 decades of the Republic, and as well the experience of the women and the girls that you probably hear from them in the current context?
Sure. Thank you so much, Rajan. First of all, it's an honor to be here with you and Aida Jan on the stage. When I think about my life in Afghanistan, I always consider myself as one of the luckiest women from Afghanistan. And the word lucky obviously means different to us Afghan women than it would mean to others. I was born in the late 1990s, and that was when Afghanistan was transitioning from the first Taliban rule to a Republican government. So that's why we had opportunities to go to school. Obviously, it wasn't great, but there was a school for us to go to. My mom and my aunts, they made sure that I go to school and not just go to school, but be one of the top students in the class, because they knew the pain of not having access to education and just exist as a woman outside. So they always encouraged me to use every opportunity I get in the best way possible. So in addition to just going to traditional school, I was also going to all these private educational centers that were teaching students new skills, new languages. There were a lot of nonprofits where Afghan women were working for a better future. So that was also an opportunity for me to join and volunteer. Just seeing all of that in Afghanistan during that period, and just listening to my mother and my aunts about their experience through when the first time the Taliban took over Afghanistan, that was giving me a lot of enthusiasm that I had to do more, and it was never enough for us, because once you learn something in Afghanistan as an Afghan woman during that period, you had the responsibility on your shoulders to do more and to do for others. In addition to that, I also witnessed some of the greatest and most significant democratic movements in Afghanistan. And Junbish Roshnai, or the Enlightenment movement, is one of them, where hundreds and thousands of people would go on the streets and hold the government accountable for the minorities' rights, for women's rights. And as a teenager in Afghanistan, and witnessing all those movements, that was giving me personally a lot of hope. So to sum up, my life in Afghanistan during the 2 decades was entirely around education and schoolwork. And that wasn't just for me, it was for most of girls in my generation. I have friends from that period of time who all are great women right now. They're women leaders, they're business leaders, and that was because we were encouraged to do that. And Ida John and the robotics team obviously is an extraordinary example of a woman from my generation who dreamed big, who didn't stop. And to say this, it wasn't easy for us to do that because Afghanistan was still going under a lot of security concerns. Taliban still existed in most parts of Afghanistan, even in the outskirts of Kabul. The Taliban were still there. You are not allowed to travel anywhere, or even if you were, you wouldn't be able to do that because if they found out that you were working within organizations or if you were a woman and doing things that they don't like, obviously, as people know what they want women to do right now, you weren't allowed to do that. Like, I grew up in Afghanistan, but unfortunately, I haven't even been able to go to Bamyan, which is one of the best places in Afghanistan, and that still remained a hope for me. I have been to multiple different countries, but I haven't been able to travel to one of the provinces of Afghanistan that I wanted to go. But still, none of those stopped us. We still continued. I traveled abroad for my college in 2016, and that was another achievement, one of the biggest achievements, because for women to be able to travel by themselves abroad, that's impossible right now. It was impossible when my mom was a teenager. So even when I went to college, still, every assignment, every research I was doing, it was about Afghanistan. I wanted to know more. I wanted to do to be able to know what we could do for Afghanistan when we go back. Me and most of my friends, we spend our summers back in Afghanistan doing other things. Like I said, we had the responsibility to go back and to help the ones inside Afghanistan who didn't have the opportunity to be outside and to learn other skills or a language. One of the projects that I always talk about and I am really proud of was in 2018 in the summer. Me and my best friend, we went back home and we organized workshops for high schoolers, and it was about menstruation. We were just talking about it because it was a taboo and it still is a taboo in Afghanistan. You don't talk about menstruation. It's a huge shame. And then the part I'm more proud of is because when we got back to our university, our participants who were high schoolers, they reached out to me and my best friend, and they were asking if they could do the same project for middle schoolers. So that was great, and they continued doing that project in Afghanistan for years. But after I graduated in 2020, I went back to Afghanistan. Roya Jan was asking about that earlier. Why did you decide to go back to Afghanistan? Because when you leave the country, the situation is really bad that you want to secure a life somewhere else, because the hope and thinking of your like normal life in Afghanistan was almost impossible even at that period. But for me, that experience and just like the motivation and that age that I always wanted to go back. Most of my family members, they were like asking me to not come back and to stay somewhere else. But I decided that I wanted to go back and start a life. I was ready to take challenges. I was ready to work and contribute in building a future for Afghanistan that I wanted to live in. I started working in a private consultancy, and even that was one of the best experiences of my life. But unfortunately, it wasn't even a year that I started working that the Taliban took over Afghanistan. That was a big shock for me personally, because I was expecting anything, but I was never expecting Afghanistan to fall. And that also in 2021, when the world was a different place, and I was outside Afghanistan. I've seen the world from a different perspective. So for me, for Afghanistan to go under the Taliban rule once again, and for women to not be able to go out, it was just, I wasn't even imagining that. And the environment in Afghanistan in 2020 was so different. I remember going to coffee shops, and these coffee shops weren't just coffee shops for us. It was a place for women to come together and to talk to each other. There was live music. You could just go out anytime you wanted. And that wasn't just a simple thing for us Afghan women. That was our efforts during those 2 decades. And after the Taliban took over Afghanistan, we lost it all. And it was when most of our hopes and dreams shattered. But that's when we were evacuated to the US, and I found myself still working and still standing up, which I wasn't imagining. In the darkest period in 2021, when we came to the US, I stayed in a military camp for 3 months, I believe. And even then, me and a couple of my friends, Batul, who is here in the audience, we started a school in the military base, and we named it Rise Again, because that's why we wanted to do it. We started with like 5 to 10 kids. We were just teaching them basic alphabets. And in no time, we found out ourselves in a place that we had 500 students of all ages, all Afghan women, kids. They all wanted to learn. They all wanted to learn a new language. They knew that now that they are in the US, they need to learn English to survive. And then we had to hire teachers and all these organizations who were helping refugees in the base. They had to step in because that was out of our control. Obviously, we couldn't handle it. We couldn't handle like 500 students. So that's once again, we found ourselves still working for a future that was unknown. But still, the reason I am highlighting this is one thing I have learned from myself and other Afghan women and other Afghans in general is the resiliency that we have. And even when I was doing my research with Afghan refugee, Brown, any parent you would talk to, the first thing they talk about and the first concern they talk about is their children's education and how they want their children to get the best education possible. So from my experience in Afghanistan and now here in the US, I think we Afghans, for some reason, have become so resilient that nothing can stop us. And even right now, during this Taliban period, women were the first people who would stand against the Taliban, even in the darkest situation, because they wanted to continue and they wanted to fight.
Thank you, Nilabjan. So I think... So for last questions, I think that if you can, both of you tell us about what's your ambitions for the long term for Afghanistan, and what do you have a message for the girls in the country?
Despite all the challenges that we are facing right now, and we have something that is always motivating me and keeping me move forward, is the strength and the potential that I can see in Afghan youth, especially the girls, and initiatives like the Afghan Dreamers are trying and are actually changing those dreams into reality. And something that I'm really hoping for is to see Afghanistan where all girls, without any exception, have equal access to education, to opportunities, and we can see more policymakers, more leaders, and more change makers, as we have seen in the recent years, that are mostly women in Afghanistan. And also something that has a special place in my heart is innovating, advocating and working towards to make Afghanistan a better and brighter place. And I'm hoping for an Afghanistan that is not known for its challenges, but it's known for the potential of its people.
To be very honest, with what I have experienced, it's really hard for me to see the future. And not to be negative, it's just that maybe that's part of the trauma I have gone through. But if you ask me what wakes me up in the morning, every day, that's the hope to live again. And with live again, I mean not to just be alive in different parts of the world. I just am really hopeful that one day we could all go back to a free Afghanistan, and that for all of us Afghan women, our only concern would be maybe our outfit choice to go out, to go to school or to go to work and just have a normal life. And that's what I dream about, and that's what my hope is. because we have already done our parts. I think all Afghan women are already heroes. We don't have to do anything extraordinary. Just we all deserve to live again and to be with our loved ones. And I just want all of us to not wait for years to see our family members and our loved ones. And that's what wakes me up in the morning every day.
Thank you, Nilojan. Thank you, Nilot. Thank you, Aida. And we will see you later in the program. And before I leave, I just wanted to also say that a few days ago, the EU voted for recognizing gender apartheid as a crime. And this is a great achievement after 3 years of the Afghan women fighting for the rights of the women in the country. And we are hoped to see the other countries also, including US governments, to participate in it. So I think that was great, but that's, I wanted to say that, yeah, the situation in Afghanistan is dark and is doubting, but the resilience and the courage and creativity the younger generation, and especially the women of Afghanistan have, is give us hope for the future. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I think we can give them another round of applause. And I would love to invite my panel members on stage as I give you some opening remarks. My name is Ines, and my t-shirt is from my country, Peru. At the back, it says, "Somos las voces de las que ya no están," which means we are the voices and the cries of the women who are no longer here. And I think many of us here resonate in our countries with many women who are struggling, and maybe even ourselves. I was looking in the room, and most of us are women. Thank you to the men who also showed up today, because I think it's important that when we're talking about gender equality, it's not just women talking to women, but it's all of us discussing how we can solve this. And something that struck me from the video that we watched earlier, the trailer, was a moment when they said, "I don't think I can do it." And I think we can do it. And I know that the trailer then showed that momentum and really changing the pace and doing it. So hopefully when you end and leave today, you also feel that we can do it and we can change things. I'm holding in my hand something that's called the Learning Agenda, and this was developed by over 50 young people across the world, most of them from the Global South, I believe more than 80%. Some of them are even in the room today. And we were exploring the difficult questions of what does it actually take to solve these big issues, from climate change to health to gender equality and all the intersecting issues. And there is quite a lot of gender equality in there. One of the things it says is the number of women and girls in conflict zones jumped by 50%, increasing the risk of violence from 2017 to 2022. These sobering statistics are not something we should just read on a page, but we can find solutions to. And many of the women, well, all of the women, and I'm sure all of the ones in the audience and on the stage today are doing things to tackle these issues. So I'm really honored to be on the stage with you today, and we'll go through a conversation where we can explore not only the questions, but also the actionable solutions. And this learning agenda that is hot off the press, I can tell you it arrived at 10 p.m. last night in a box, so you will be some of the first to be able to see it on our website, and there will be a link later that you can scan for that as well. It does explore all the questions, and we have time now to try and find those solutions and also help decision makers, because I believe we shouldn't be talking on our own, and I'm also grateful for the decision makers that are in the room with us today that can take this to rooms where we're not in. So let's move to this panel discussion. And first of all, maybe I should introduce who is on stage with me. We have Ms. Marcy Levy, who's an adolescent development manager with the adolescent and youth team at UNICEF HQ. Thank you for being with us. We also have Naria Santa Lucia on the end of the stage, who's the General Manager for Digital Inclusion and Community Engagement at Microsoft Philanthropies. Welcome. and Valeria Colunga, who's a 23-year-old activist, social entrepreneur, and community organizer from Monterrey, Mexico, and recently took a role as Executive Strategy Officer at Southern Voice. But I also know she's connected to many of our organizations, including Girl Up and UN Foundation. And we have Joanne Kembabazi, who is a passionate gender equality activist from Uganda, and she's a member of the Partnership Consortium of Education Shifts Power at UNGAI. So thank you all for being on stage. I would like to turn my first question to Marcy. So I know UNICEF has an immense reach, and the work that you do improves the lives of children around the world, and it's really very impressive. When you think today about the multitude of challenges confronted by children generally and girls specifically, where do you see the potential for most progress and significant transformation for the better?
Great, thank you. And this is on? Okay, well, thank you for having me here today, and just to acknowledge and say thank you to Ida and Nilab and the incredible stories and lived experience. It's inspiring to all of us. So thank you for sharing and to the stories we'll hear today. So the challenges, first, we do know there has been some progress, particularly on primary education for girls in some parts of the world. I think it's just important to acknowledge and celebrate some of that progress with all the many things that seem backwards and constricted. Of course, it's not true everywhere around the world for girls, and access to education, primary education, retention, secondary education just remains a tremendous problem. Violence, poverty, child marriage, domestic work at home are keeping many of the dreamers held back from even accessing those opportunities. And of course, what skills are girls learning when they're learning skills? Are they learning the important 20th century? We're 21st century now, aren't we? 21st century skills, STEM skills, financial literacy, vocational skills. So enormous challenges. So at UNICEF, we have undergone a process listening to girls around the world through some of our big global polls and consultations, and try to put together, also looking at the data where we really have strong data, because there's a lot of places we talk about where the evidence is not maybe as strong as we'd like it to be. And we've put together 5 programmatic priorities for girls. So these will be familiar to you, but I will share them anyway. First is adolescent girl-centered health services, including HPV vaccine with plus services such as menstrual hygiene education or CSE education, alongside HIV prevention, reliable age-appropriate information for both boys and girls, and of course mental health, which I'll talk about later. Second, a life free of anemia and malnutrition. 1/3 of all girls worldwide suffer from malnutrition, anemia. I mean, it's not always the sexiest of causes, but think of the impact on a developing brain when you're malnourished, or on a young girl who has a child of anemia. Third is investing in girls' learning and skills. This is financial literacy, this is vocational, this is leadership. These are skills that girls themselves want and say they need to thrive and survive. Fourth is safety and freedom from gender-based violence, so scaling up work such as gender transformative parenting and caregiver programs to sort of break intergenerational traumas and norms, and then of course linking prevention, response, community, what's happening in the community to what happens in the facility to what happens in the police station and so forth. And then cash and care, and this is really where girls have power over their future, that economic security, scaling up social protection, child marriage intervention, so girls can, again, start to make choices. But the question you asked was what the potential for the most progress and significant transformation, which is a subjective question, and I'm answering this both as UNICEF, but also from running a global program for young girls around the world who are change makers and want to make change. And I think for UNICEF, one of the biggest spaces we can influence is using sort of our standing to help open up the spaces for girls like Nilab and girls like Ida to make the change that they think is important, that they want to see. Now, we often have so many programs around the world where there's giving, a sort of traditional narrative of charity or development, and it's like long past the time that needs to switch. It's girls who are going to get us to adolescent girl health services, and girls who are going to do that hard work to make sure that their governments and their parents and their communities are investing in girls' learning and skills. So for us, all of the 5 program priorities that I just mentioned are absolutely and continually, we're really trying, we're learning, we're partnering with many of you in this room to think about how we use what UNICEF can bring to help ensure girls have those enabling spaces and are at the table and are able to advocate for themselves and make the change that they want to see to really move the needle in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that's precisely, yeah, we can give her a round of applause. That's precisely also why we're having this event, because many of the voices of women aren't being heard, and it's good to create these spaces and necessary to do that. I do realize that I ran on stage and really wanted to get to the discussion and forgot an important announcement. I've seen many people have been taking pictures and videos, which is fantastic. First plug, please tag our future agenda so that we can repost you. But second important thing is please do not take any photos of people in the audience unless you know them and have spoken to them, just because we want to make sure that everyone is comfortable and that they have consented to have their picture taken. So please feel free to take pictures of people on stage. We love that. But make sure that people have consented if they're in the audience and you're taking their pictures. So now, after that announcement is done, let me turn to the second question. Narya, I'd like to come to you. Keeping children and girls in particular safe and improving their livelihoods is a thread that we're starting to pull even from Marcy's intervention. Your task at Microsoft Philanthropies is to think about how to make strategic investments in preparing different underrepresented and underserved communities for a new digital economy. Could you tell us about the investments that you are making to ensure that girls and women around the world can thrive in this changing economy of today?
Yes, thank you so much. And first of all, thank you so much to the UN Foundation, to the ambassador, special envoy. So amazing to see women in positions of power and in decision-making seats. So we just need more of that. An amazing panel from Ida and from NELAB. It was just so inspiring. And I look at those two as young women, it's like the future's bright. There is hope. So tremendous. And again, excited about this panel as well. So at Microsoft, we always start with our mission, which is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And of course, we know every means every, and that especially means young women and girls who maybe are from communities that are further from opportunity. So that's where we get to kind of step in and play a role within philanthropies. So I'm very honored that I have this job to be able to train and skill individuals in digital skills that are so important. And one of the things that we really do whenever we make any investment or partnership, and we partner with UNICEF, partner with so many organizations here in this room and across the UN system, but we really ask that every partnership is co-designed and really centers on women so that there is parity in every program. And then we specifically have programs that are only for women and girls. And why that's really important is that we need to call it out and name it and put our investments behind, our beliefs and our mission. And so that's why we do that. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So we've been doing a lot on digital skills. I used to go around everywhere and be like, every job will be a digital job. And actually in the past few months, I've now changed that to say every job will require AI fluency. And I know this is a buzzword for many people, but I really do believe that AI is a tool that can leapfrog so many communities. And if we can really leverage this tool in the right way, responsibly, especially in the global south, especially for women and girls. I mean, I think the possibility with the resilience of women and girls taking this tool is just going to be endless. So I want to just say a quick few things. So it took 16 years for mobile phones to reach 100 million users. And it took 3 months for ChatGPT to get 100 million users. That's the pace of change that we're seeing with this technology. Our work trend index that we publish quarterly within Microsoft, we found that already 75% of knowledge workers are using generative AI, and 66% of leaders of organizations say they wouldn't hire somebody if they didn't know about the tool and know how to use it. That's the pace of change. And the part that's worrisome is that we're already seeing that some jobs and some skills required for jobs, they may more disrupt roles that are traditionally held by women and for young people. So the moment is now. There's huge use, but there's also a risk. So that's where we've been actually putting our investments in the future. We have a goal of training 25 million people on generative AI this year. We're focusing on users so that people can leapfrog, do their job. I always laugh because I can't actually make a pivot table in Excel, but now I can with generative AI. But we're also focusing on developers. Like, I met a bunch of CS women here. That's who we need at the table developing these tools and technologies, or they're going to continue to have bias, continue to have all the traditional things. Like, we're at the starting line, and we can do it right this time by making sure that there are lots of women developers in the room and people from various economic backgrounds as well. So that's kind of the, the opportunity. I have one super silver lining in this. We're seeing a lot of skills, especially on LinkedIn, and jobs being increased with AI. But at the same time, there's tremendous growth in what they used to call soft skills, but I think are power skills: collaboration, communication, working together. And guess what? Guess who's really good at that stuff? Sorry for the male allies in the room. But guess who's good at that stuff? It's the women. So I really think that we can really stand up in this moment, leverage the technology, but also continue to focus on what makes women amazing, which are all of these transversal power skills. And I think the opportunities are limitless.
Thank you so much. I love that you mentioned that now, thanks to AI, you can use Excel. My team will laugh at this when I'm staying on stage. I've never used ChatGPT. I don't like AI. I'm actually writing a paper on AI and cities to challenge myself to see how we can actually use it. So I'm glad to hear that it's working for you. And I was flipping through, looking on this learning agenda. One of the big questions we've asked is, how can we close the gender gap? And you've already given us some of the solutions that you're working on. And Valeria, I'd love to come to you because as you're recently taking up the post as Executive Strategy Officer at Southern Voice, you are part of this huge network of think tanks and an evidence hub for the Global South. And this gives you a particularly unique perspective on challenges that are experienced by young women and girls around the world, and how we can actually go around shaping that research about the challenges that they are experiencing. So could you tell us how we can do better in talking about the challenges experienced by girls, and how can we recognize that power dynamic that exists and try to overcome it?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, great. Thank you, Inez, and thank you also to the UN Foundation for the invitation for this event. So I recently joined Southern Voice, and for those who haven't heard about Southern Voice before, we are a network of 70 think tanks from the Global South, so Asia, Latin America, and Africa. And what we do is that we work on promoting research on the Sustainable Development Goals, but also on rebalancing the knowledge asymmetry in the world. And one of the things that I really enjoy about this organization that I recently joined is the focus that they have on research topics that are of interest to women. And one of the things that I was actually really impressed on is there's a focus on thinking and talking about the care economy, which we know it's so important for women. And I think it's also showcases how in research there are so many fields that are left behind, not only by the lack of interest, but also by the lack of funding that is being given to this type of topics. I was really struck by the fact that only around 30% of researchers are women in the world. That's insane. And then also when we look more deeply into the STEM field, only around 38% of people in the STEM field are women. And I think that showcases two different things. One, and I feel like we constantly talk about education, but the first one is we need to be very conscious about the opportunities that we're giving people, specifically women, in the educational space, including also the fact that many women, I'm from Mexico, born and raised, and growing up in Mexico, I was very lucky that my parents had graduate degrees. But to me, I just feel like talking with young people my age, it was like there wasn't really this interest in going beyond the bare minimum of education. And I feel like the more that I have been able to surround myself with inspiring people, like people in this room, but also with people that are interested in the very important topics that have to be researched, that's how we are realizing that there is a need to, as we have been mentioning, use technology and also take interest on the specific topics that are important for young women and girls. Having said that, I also believe that one of the main things that I have seen from my activism beyond Southern Boys and just in the other roles that I have taken is that oftentimes when we talk about gender equality, oftentimes when we talk about women, we forget that young women and girls are part of the agenda, but they are a specific topic of the agenda that needs to be treated differently. And I think that that's one of the main takeaways from the Beijing conference that, as has been mentioned before, is reaching its anniversary. I was lucky enough to meet with one of the Mexican negotiators for the conference some years ago, and there was this very specific emphasis on why the Beijing conference treats young women and girls as a different section of the treaty, why it's important to treat that part as a different topic. And part of the reason why is that we need more research on the specific experience that young women and girls are living and the specific intergenerational, not only experiences, but also what will happen with the policymaking and the actions we're taking today when it comes to affecting younger women. So I would say, first of all, giving, of course, more educational opportunities, but also empowering women to know that they are able and should be researching the specific items of their own agenda.
Thank you, Valeria. And you were just, yes, please, give it a clap. You were just talking about the specific issues for girls. One of the things that I've been looking at recently is endometriosis. 1 in 10 women actually have endometriosis. Maybe they don't know it. So if I look around the room, that's maybe 10 of us here today. That's a huge stat, and men don't struggle with that. And there's so little research about those kinds of topics. And something else that I'm going to ask you, Joanne, now is on child marriage. And I was recently in Kenya visiting an organization working on child marriage called Msichana Empowerment Kuria, and it opened my eyes to a world that I didn't even know this is something that women struggle with because it wasn't in my context. So I know that your activism goes back to your teen years and you've had very vocal advocacy on the need to end child marriage. And you've continued your involvement through Return My Future campaign, which is an apt name, I think, to think about the Summit of the Future as well, which is due to start tomorrow for those who didn't know. I think everyone did. So what needs to change in Uganda and more broadly for girls to grow up feeling supported that they can create change in their communities?
Okay, thank you so much for having me here. You might just be seeing Joan, but I'm carrying thousands of voices of girls with me today. And about the question, first of all, I believe in the power of education. The first thing that I believe should be done, not only in Uganda, but in the world as large, it's increasing girls' access to quality education. We all know that education empowers girls, and every girl deserves access to free, inclusive, and gender transformative education. But then you see that 2 out of 10 girls in my country, Uganda, only continue with further education that is secondary, because we have primary, secondary, and university. And then you also look at the global statistics that nearly 120 million girls are out of school today. So I believe that increasing girls' access to education really can empower them to become global champions, to become change makers, because I am a product of education. And girls being out of school is because of different factors. And I believe poverty is one of the biggest challenge that is, affecting girls' education, because I personally come from a community that before, when I was studying, because I hold a bachelor's degree right now, but before, when I was studying primary, secondary, my community didn't have a school. Until today, it doesn't have a school. So I had to walk like 8 miles every day to go to the nearest school in my community. But because I was so much dedicated, I continued, I persevered, because I wanted to show the power that education has in the lives of girls. But then you look at some girls who face challenges with these long distances to school, challenges that come with, being harassed, or even sometimes you just wake up and you're like, no, I'm really tired. It's a long distance. You reach at school very hungry. Sometimes you're barefooted. And I just believe that if it wasn't for that scholarships, because I was a very bright student during my school days, if it wasn't for the free scholarships that I got from my schools, I wouldn't have completed my education, and I wouldn't have been who I am today, like empowering girls, being an example and an inspiration, and of course I wouldn't be sitting here today. So I believe if there is a chance, because there is, of providing free education opportunities, not just having girls in classrooms, but providing that education that is inclusive, that is gender transformative, is one of the ways that we can, support girls to be real change makers. And another thing is empowering and mentoring girls. It's a very, very big factor when it comes to girls thriving and, coming out, because I've been empowered before, and it's the reason as to why I stood up for my right to education, and it's what I'm doing for girls in my community. I'll take an example of the Return My Future. That's a campaign that we launched last year, and it's a campaign that is a voice for girls. Girls are demanding their futures to be returned to them. Girls are demanding leaders, parents, to let them decide for their own futures, for their own bodies, because girls are being married off young. Decisions are being made on their behalf and not girls themselves. So that campaign has empowered more than 2,000 girls since last year, and we've seen the impact that is in empowering girls to stand up. We've seen girls speaking up against injustices. We've seen girls challenging social and gender norms. We've seen girls holding leaders accountable, and that is because of the Return My Future campaign, which is an empowerment campaign that supports girls with leadership skills, with information that they need, that they deserve, and that is required for them to know about their rights, to know about what they really deserve. So that is so much important. Empowerment is really so much important. And another thing is improving access, girls' access to health. Health is very, very important when it comes to lives of girls, and more than anyone else, because providing health, especially sexual and reproductive health, is really very important, because it provides girls with accurate information that they need to make informed decisions for their bodies and futures. And another thing is we cannot, like, this work can never be done alone. We need the world at large. There is an African proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child. We need every stakeholder. We need parents, we need teachers, we need leaders, chiefs, and religious leaders. We need everyone, because when we empower these stakeholders, when we show them, or when we talk to them and show that they have this responsibility of raising and bringing up girls, it can really help them in shaping the lives of girls. Because I remember when I was growing up, every time a leader or an elder person finds you when you're playing on the way from or to school, they'll have to pick a stick and beat you. Like, why are you here? You're supposed to be here. So that really shapes you, and they're like, okay, I don't have to play when I'm going to school or when I'm after, school. So it really gives you that discipline. So I think, personally, that's what I think should be done.
Fantastic. Please give her a round of applause. So many real life examples, and also the explanation of how we can also solve it. It's simple. Get girls educated, right? Let us go to school. And I see some people even in the audience now. I saw Meg earlier from the Scouts who works on non-formal education, and that's something that can be done too. It's like going to school, but what else? How can we help girls thrive outside of that? I think Valeria was talking about the percentage of women researchers, 30%. Ruchira, who's right here to my right, is a researcher with CEW, so she's one of those 30%, and I hope there are more. And I am really, really keen to come to our audience very soon, so start preparing your questions. We're going to come to you, but we'll do a quick fire round with all of you again, and I'll come to you, Joanne, first. Let's go in reverse order. I want to ask you a follow-up question. So I would be curious of what challenges you have encountered in your activism, because it's important for us to highlight that speaking up at times comes with a cost, and we need to work to mitigate that cost for girls as well who are outspoken about the rights of girls and women. So what challenges did you encounter in your journey?
First of all, I think I'll speak for myself as a leader of a grassroots organization, but also I'll speak on behalf of all youth-led organizations. I think one of the biggest challenges that we face is the limited funding support from donors, from donor organizations, and that also comes with a restricted funding. Oh my goodness, how am I supposed to provide, how is it called? Like a big, because if you don't give me the support, how am I going to provide you with these criteria of, we want like $50,000, like if you've worked on a budget of $50,000 or $100,000, like how am I going to, if you don't give me this, the funding, how am I going to provide that? So I think, that real holds our work back. It really does, and it limits our work, our impact. And another thing is, at grassroots, it's really some work that cannot be undermined. Working with communities that are really deeply rooted with those cultural norms, with those inequalities, it's really hard to bring them together and empower them, talk to them, educate them, challenge all that. It's really some kind of work that comes with so much efforts. And another thing that I think I should talk about, that it used to hurt me, but it no longer does. I do social media advocacy so much, and I used to have these threads, and I used to have like people tell me, you're idle, you don't have what to do, you just want attention. That really used to hurt me so much, but it no longer does, because I see where we're going.
Woohoo!
Yeah, I do.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think there are quite a lot of challenges as a young person that I've faced. Sometimes when you really want to, like when you're holding leaders accountable, because our government has done some commitments to ending child marriage, has done commitments on girls' education, but when you do not see the results and you're trying to speak out, sometimes you're silenced by those that you're supposed to run to. So yeah, it's quite hard.
I'm sure that's something that Valeria resonates with as well, on the challenges of being an activist. And I'm going to break the wall of the audience and the panel just to say we do have a timer at the top, panelists. So just so you know, when it's your question, it will be 2 minutes, and I will try and be kind and not cut you off, but just so you know, it's there. Okay, so Valeria, you've been actively working in conversations about intergenerational justice and the ways we must work with and across generations to secure a better future for all. Could you tell us about how we should think about the investments in girls and women today and some smart buys for the future?
Yes, and I think John hit the spot when she was talking about funding. I mean, ever since COVID-19, I feel like the world has shifted in significant ways, and more we're hearing the word of we're living in a public crisis, we're facing multiple challenges at the same time, we're having wars actively happening, and we have had them happen even before COVID-19, but I feel like now more than ever, we're feeling that those wars are either getting closer to us or getting closer to our way of living or closer to people that we know. And sadly, I have seen firsthand how this polycrisis world we're living in has not only affected our focus on girls, which I believe we should continue having a lens and a focus on that topic always until we achieve true gender equality. But also I feel like one of the main issues is that now fundraising has gotten to a point where we're competing against each other, right? It almost feels like we need to choose the most important or the most urgent topic of it all in order to allocate our money there. And I believe we are at a risk point right now where we cannot just stop looking at the topic of young women and girls just so we can continue fundraising for other topics, which again, all of them are important. But if we are truly about not leaving anyone behind, we need to make sure that that fundraising doesn't stop coming for young women and girls. And I believe that what Joanne was saying was precisely that. When you are an activist, when you're a young woman, many of the challenges that you face, besides tokenism, besides the fact that people might doubt your work and what you're doing, a lot of it's about fundraising. A lot of it is about the credibility of what you're doing with that money. And I feel like time and time again, young women and girls, they are asked to make their cause credible. They're asked to just like make it credible. Why should I be investing in you? And I feel like the question shouldn't be, why should I be investing with you? Because I think we all understand the importance of investing in young women and girls. I think we should be changing the narrative into, I am investing with you, and I am trusting that you will take that investment into the right hands and the right opportunities. Because I come here also representing Girl Up, and the Girl Up experience for the many years I have been with them is that when you give young women and girls the money in order to mobilize their communities, they will actually do magic, actually do things that we have never been seeing before. It is young women from Girl Up, in this example, in Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, my own country, that have been actually not only changing laws, but also mobilizing funding in significant ways for menstruation health, for reproductive rights, and for the representation of young women in legislation. So it's not about questioning whether we should be given funding, but it's about having the trust that they will take that funding into the right places and right hands.
Thank you, Valeria. Thank you. You mentioned Girl Up, and we actually have a pitch segment in a bit when we get there, which has a Girl Up young leader pitching. So we will get there in a minute. But Naria, I did want to come to you. You were talking about the digital gap before, and we know only 21% of women in low-income countries are online compared to 89% of Europeans. Can you speak to us about the investment and partnerships you are making so that girls and women in the development world can access the skills that they need in this AI-driven economy?
Yes, and actually I love this conversation about funding, and I want to touch on that. I'm going to try to do it with this response in 2 minutes, which is, so everything that we do, of course, we do it in partnership, and that is a table stakes kind of way we operate. So we'll usually find a local nonprofit. For me, the closer you get to the community, to your point, Joan, the better. So the ones like that are actually hearing back from the beneficiaries and what they need, that's kind of the nonprofit we really want to work with. And then we always try to find a scale partner, whether that's a government or somebody from the UN system. Because I think all these things need to work together, right? I think it was Shamina Singh from MasterCard Foundation, maybe in this room, who said, I loved it, like if you want to go deep, go with community. If you want to go fast, go with the private sector. And if you want to go at scale, go with government, but you need to do it all together. So we try to build that ecosystem in what we do. I want to, because I think I'm one of the funders on this stage. The best thing I ever did during Microsoft, maybe in my whole career, was during COVID, we made all of our grants unrestricted. And the more we get closer to that as funders, I don't know if there's other funders in this room, is that, what do we know? We're sitting here in our companies, we're sitting here in our seats. We're not going to be close to this problem, like exactly living day in and day out. So that we got to get closer to the NGOs, to the experts that are on the ground doing this work, hopefully the beneficiaries directly. So that's going to be the best kind of funding. Every year, we try to think about how we can bring, things forward where we are doing trust-based philanthropy. I know that's gotten a little bit, iffy in the last few years. But that is going to be, something that we continue to look at every year. And I'm going to make a pledge to go back to my team and think about that and bring some of those qualities. And I would encourage all the other funders to do the same.
Woohoo! Our first pledge. I love it. Thank you. Some people are taking notes actually to follow up on pledges later, so we'll come back to you on that one. Marcy, I do want to come to you. At UNICEF at the moment, your portfolio has a focus on mental health and adolescent girls' issues, among many other things. Could you speak to us more about what mental health support and services should look like in a gender-equal world that we are aspiring to build, especially considering that UNICEF reports that 1 in 7 adolescents globally experience mental health issues?
Yes, I'm so happy you asked me this question to talk about mental health. But I do first want to say, to the point here around funding, and particularly funding for girl-led and young people-led organizations, that it's an enormous barrier. And we at UNICEF, the executive director, is aware of this barrier, and as part of our adolescent girl program strategy, which she and senior leadership are very much behind, we are also looking at ways to make our internal systems easier as a multilateral agency to be able to loosen up those funds, an example for how those funds can go to organizations that are doing the real work. So I'm hopeful for the next while. Okay, mental health. So it is just a tremendous issue. I mean, the facts speak for itself. All your lives and all your friends, I'm sure, speak for itself. 77 million girls around the world have a mental disorder, and of course we know the data is really complicated and in our estimates, underrepresented. For many girls, the burden represents and manifests as self-harm, which has obviously devastating outcomes, but I think it also represents a particularly visible manifestation of sort of silent struggles and has sort of larger analogies for what girls go through in their daily lives. So we are very serious and very intensive about working on mental health. We're reaching over almost 40 million children, adolescents, and their caregivers in 130 countries. But to the question of a more gender equal approach to mental health, I think there are some really key themes that, again, the normative ways in which we talk about things that need to shift. And I think, again, I'm always thinking about, well, we're UNICEF, we don't do a lot of things well, but what can we actually do and where is our standing? And I think in terms of shifting sort of the conversation, that's something that this organization can play a role on. And I think there's 3 sort of key things we need to do in order to have that go very quickly. One is that when we ignore the right to good mental health and well-being, we undermine the realization and the enjoyment of all other rights. It's a right to be nurtured. It's a positive state of well-being. It's an essential investment to be able to realize all rights that adolescents have the right to realize. Second is that it transcends every one of us. It's universal. Mental health is not bad or good or negative or positive. It's a state. And that conversation and sort of understanding needs to happen in every family, every school, every workplace and community. And then third, that it's an asset. Mental health is an asset. It's an asset. Assets are part of being empowered. It's about a girl being able to talk and laugh with her friends, to talk to her caregiver, to go to school, to take challenges on. It's about a mother being able to support a child's emotional well-being, bonding, attachment. It's sort of fundamental for a girl to thrive. And so I think that it's less, of course, we need to make sure there are girl-friendly services and availabilities, but I think the conversations are what need to change. And I will just close on, as I mentioned, I run a program for global change makers, and they're making change for climate, they're making change for nutrition, for mental health, for did I say climate, for a number of other areas. But the number one thing every one of these young change makers tell me deep in the communities is mental health. To be able to change the world, to be a leader, to be a caregiver, to be a parent, it's mental health. So really great question. I hope this conversation comes up in many conversations about how we support and empower girls to lead, and thank you for raising it today.
It will continue, for sure. So you will see coming up on the screen, I know we don't have much time for Q&A, but we do want to make sure we can capture everyone's insights and thoughts on this topic. If you haven't yet signed up to the Wi-Fi, please do. Tech team, please do help me. And there will be a Mentimeter where you can answer a couple polls and also ask a question. If we don't get to it right now, we'll make sure to share these and also to reflect on these throughout the years we continue developing the learning agenda. Something I didn't mention is that in our program, we also have what we call the engine room, which actually helped develop this learning agenda. I don't think I said engine room per se before. And we're going to continue working in the coming years to actually tackle these issues and these questions that will come up. So the first question you have is, what challenges threaten gender equal futures? Feel free to write what it is for you. There will be a second question also that you can answer, and then there'll be a space where you can write your own question. But for the sake of time, we're going to do this simultaneously. And I don't want to pick on people in the audience randomly, but I can see someone right across from me, Allison. I would love if you have a question, and maybe someone can get her mic. And in the meantime, everyone else in the audience, please make sure to write your question in the Mentimeter. You should write your name, and that way, if we have time, we can come to you too. But Allison, does someone brought your mic? Great.
Hi, everyone. So thank you so much to everyone that has spoken and is on stage right now. The question that I came up with is for Valeria, but of course anyone can take it. If you had the money, what is the first thing you're buying? Who is the first person you're hiring? Where do you want to see the money go when you are talking about like boots on the ground? And alternatively, what do you want us to do when we leave?
Thank you. I believe that, as I was saying before, one of the biggest challenges is the questioning behind why we should be putting the money in certain places. From what I have seen, I believe the money should be going, first of all, to civil society organizations. I think that's a big part of where the work is actually happening. Of course, institutions like Girl Up, which I keep bringing up, but that's just because of how great it is. And part of the reason for that is that, from my own experience, I started working in Girl Up when I was 16. And through organizations like that, you're able to request for money. And when they give you the money, it's no questions, just go and do your work. I have seen people that have used that money to create campaigns at a national level that have, to this day, actually changed national laws. I have seen people use that money to give robotics classes to young women and girls that don't have education. I have seen people use that money to put on events with high-level decision makers that otherwise would be very hard to reach and, put this conversation in the forefront. But more than anything, I would say I think money needs to go into, and I feel like we keep bringing it up, but health. I feel like that's one of the main things that is putting young women behind. And when I say health, I do really actually mean reproductive health. That's one of the main things. There is a very strong correlation between health and education. And I think we keep bringing it up, but it's so incredibly important. And the other part, which I think the Mentimeter is showcasing as well, is gender-based violence. Mexico has one of the worst cases of gender-based violence. We have a strong rate of feminicide happening. And we're just a few connections away, everyone in the country is a few connections away from someone that has experienced either gender-based violence themselves or know someone that has died because of gender-based violence. And if we're not creating safe public spaces for young women to exist, then how do we expect young women to be able to mobilize other people? So to your question of what should we be doing, I would say be advocates on your day-to-day for the causes. And if you know someone that has the money, I would say, of course, it's not about like just like poking the bear and being like, please donate, but like actually, if we can bring real life cases on how that money impacts young people's lives, I think it's extremely important for us to remind them that this is not a second-class priority in our agenda. Gender equality should continue being at the forefront of what we're doing at the Summit of the Future and beyond. And specifically, that needs to be showcased in where we're putting our money at.
Thank you, Valeria. And thank you for your question. I saw there are a couple coming through. Thankfully, our panelists don't just live on stage. They're actually roaming around after this session and throughout the whole week. So please come and ask them your questions. I don't want to make Saru's job even harder for the pitches coming up. So if you can please give a huge round of applause to our panelists and go find them after this session. Thank you. So I'm going to introduce now Saru Duckworth as our panelists leave the stage and our pitchers come up. She's our Next Generation Fellow for Jobs and will be moderating the next segment. Saru, over to you.
Thank you so much, Inez. So I'm so excited. I'm so inspired. I'm a little bit emotional from the video, as I'm sure all of you are. It's just great to be in community with so many women that share a vision and a dream. And it's a good reminder of the power that each one of us hold to, fuel that dream in other women that come next. I was really privileged this summer to be working in Senegal. It's, in a region, the West Central Africa region, that has some of the worst gender indicators, gender-based violence among them, and sexual reproductive health, and got to work along really, really visionary young women and allies. And it was young women that were fueling some of the biggest wins that we saw, just holding the line on the gender rollback, preventing the attempted appeal of the female genital mutilation ban in the Gambia, putting forth, Sierra Leone's first child marriage ban in 2024. And even if it's just holding the line, it's innovation, it's reaching across generations, finding new ways to reach people through technology that really pushes this forward. And it's also what adversaries of gender-based gender rights and gender equality are doing really well. So we have to be better, and we will be better through innovating and through listening to young women's ideas. And that's what we're here to do today. We've invited so many impressive and bold young women in this room, and we're going to have 3 of them on stage to share their visions and ideas of how we can get to a more gender equal future. And I'm really honored, as Inez mentioned, we work alongside these girls and women in the Our Future Agenda engine room. And that's become a platform that really gathers young women, young leaders, young people of all genders who are keen to solve global challenges together. So today, hopefully, will inspire you to join us in the engine room and in future iterations of that to create a bold vision for our world to 2100. Which is a vision that prioritizes gender justice and the rights of women and girls. So without further ado, I'm going to invite first up Alua Samat from Girl Up to tell us about her transformative idea to reverse the global rollback on sexual health education, one girl at a time. And panelists, I will remind you, you have about 3 minutes, so keep those pitches tight. But without further ado, Alua.
Hello and thank you. So imagine you're 16 years old, a public school in a student area, and pregnant. And knowing your strict parents telling them isn't an option, but you can't even visit a doctor without their approval, and the information that you found on the internet is not in your language. Having served as a sex education activist for over 4 years now, I can tell you that the problem of teenage pregnancy and sexual illiteracy is all too common in Central Asia. Only in Tajikistan, it's 54 girls out of every 1,000 who annually give birth. In the Netherlands, it's 3. And that's so because in the Netherlands, sex education is mandatory and it follows a structure. Dutch teenagers are aware of their sexual and reproductive health and rights, and they treat them responsibly, while Central Asians have absolutely no resources to learn about any of this at schools or from their parents. They use their friends' knowledge and unreliable websites to learn more. But is doing this effective? And the problem of this disparity expands because it's no longer a local concern, as we've been saying this whole session, it's a global issue. And absence of sex education, leads to teenage pregnancy. Teenage pregnancy is risky for not only the mother's health, but also the infant's health, while lack of family planning can result in overpopulation, which, as leading organizations say, significantly contributes to global warming and deaths due to overconsumption of resources. So our solution to it is Not a Shame, which is a culture-specific make-your-own-choice edtech product designed specifically for teenagers who love video games and want to explore new things. Prevention and education are the best tools for change. Not a Shame will teach the growing teenage population of Central Asia by presenting real situations related to sex, consent, and relationships. And the context will be culturally relevant to Central Asia, but it can eventually be catered to other cultural contexts as well. There are points associated with the safe and correct choice, and then resources and explanations for the so-called bad choices, which means that just by making a choice, the teenager will already be learning about safe sex, ways to ask for consent, their rights, and more. My previous project, SOAS, Speak Out About Sex, reached an audience about 25,000 within a year, which allowed me to network locally and globally. And it's also not a secret that social change has to be adapted to the cultural context and the language environment, which our team can do by speaking 4 Central Asian languages combined, which will allow us to reach the non-Russian and non-English speaking audiences more easily. So you may be asking, is Not a Shame a viable solution in an ecosystem where safe sex is so stigmatized? We believe that with the current political climate, the region is desperate to combat the issue of a lack of sex education, if not through the education system, then through a game like ours. Please join us to empower the youth and help them feel not ashamed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Incredible, right? Okay, next up, to keep it going, I would love to invite the 4 members of the Impact Afghanistan team, Batul, Kathy, Yifan, and Nilab, who will speak about their project to address the lack of accurate information coming out of Afghanistan since the Taliban seized rule in 2021. Team, welcome to the stage.
Imagine a world where every critical decision is driven by data, where policies are built on evidence. But what happens when there is a data gap? When we don't have information, for example, in the places facing crisis like Afghanistan post-2021. Also, during Taliban's first rule, 1996 to 2001, there is a lack of adequate evidence on human rights and women's rights violation, on violation of international laws, lack of evidence on impact of the ruling parties on people's mental health, quality of life in education, right to education. From that era, we learned our lesson. This is where we come in. Our solution is a centralized research platform that brings together comprehensive and accurate information on post-2021 Afghanistan. It's more than just a collection of reports. It is a tool for empowering decision makers, policy makers, and global community with the data that they need to make real change. With easy access to information, verified research, and we can turn this data deficit into surplus of informed decisions for a better future for Afghanistan. Now our tech team explain the rest.
So our database posting articles through 3 main approaches, combining human expertise and tech automation to fill the data gap. First, the content team uses their domain knowledge to handpick relevant articles, filling in metadata like topics, associated organizations, and article summary. And second, we collaborate with the Brown Library to set up a pipeline that posts articles from online journals and libraries, using the team's initial list of topics as keywords. We then use large language models to extract summaries and topics from these articles and insert them into the database. And finally, we use crowdsourcing by allowing researchers and students to submit their own research using a Google form, which is reviewed by the content team and then add to the database.
Yeah, so on our website, we have a homepage for some announcements and resources. I don't know if we can get that pulled up, but if not, that's totally fine. But of course, the part you are all waiting for is the actual database site. So essentially, like Yvonne mentioned, once the magic happens and everything is uploaded to our server, it directly communicates real time with our database website. So this is that's a separate page on the site. This is the home site. But that database table has a robust search feature allowing users to filter articles by topics, dates, like publication dates, associated organizations, things like that. Yeah, so this essentially just allows whatever user is accessing the website to efficiently find whatever resources they may be looking for. Currently, we have approximately 750 articles in the database, but of course, we are always looking for more. So if you know anyone who has research they'd like to submit, please let us know.
Incredible job, team. It's just kind of extraordinary what you guys have been working on here, and thanks for giving us a peek. Lastly, I would love to invite Lauren Simpson from Restless Development up to the stage to share her call for all of us to say a resounding no to violence. Lauren, where are you at? Give her a round as she comes up. Yeah, let's keep the energy going.
At least one woman is killed by a man every 3 days. Let that sink in. Working in local government in the UK has further exposed me to the violence women and girls face on a daily basis, with domestic abuse accounting for almost 25% of all recorded violent crime. We can no longer ignore this pattern, despite headlines continuing to label gender-based violence as accidental, profoundly shocking, or a random attack. Violence has a gender that we all need to recognise. Whilst not all men are perpetrators, it only takes one to create devastating consequences. So now we must ask ourselves, why are we still placing the burden of safety on women? And when and how are we going to hold perpetrators accountable for their actions? We currently exist in an echo chamber. Women already agree that gender-based violence is inexcusable. Instead, we need to take this message directly to young men, whether that's in their homes, in their communities, or those of our male allies in the room today. If we don't, Sustainable Development Goal 5 on gender equality will continue to backslide. In recent years, there have been efforts to teach this demographic about healthy relationships and about gender equity. However, the marketing and accessibility of this message really matters. Policy interventions alone aren't enough if we're going to reach impressionable anti-political young men. Research shows that people respond to the community they feel represent them best, where they have the same lived experience or the same characteristics. In this case, gender is the driving force for this engagement. So my pitch for the future is identifying positive male ambassadors who young men look up to in order to counteract toxic masculinity that can and does lead to gender-based violence. For example, the 2014 UEFA No to Racism campaign could be adapted to combat gender-based violence, as sports typically attract a receptive, male-dominated audience. High-profile players, including Lionel Messi, featured in a video asking for an end to racism in football in several languages. To reinforce this message, hashtag Say No to Racism also became a social media campaign, with Facebook posts garnering almost 32 million impressions. Taking inspiration from this initiative, we can focus on the 40% rise in domestic abuse incidents during international football tournaments as a result of a man's home team losing. Captains will wear identifiable No to Violence armbands, and the children accompanying players onto the pitch will wear No to Violence t-shirts. Together, this will culminate in a successful communications campaign to create a safer environment for women. Not only would this require minimal funding, but it would also reach a significant amount of people who are often left out of the political discourse to encourage behaviour change. We can call for change by directly engaging with men and perpetrators in a language they understand, as well as continuing to commit to and measure the impacts of policies outlined in the Declaration of Future Generations and the Pact for the Future, which seek to eliminate increased levels of human rights violations, including discrimination, violence, harassment, and abuse of women and girls. Women can't fight this fight alone anymore. Say no to violence today. Thank you.
Thank you. Keep it going. Keep it going. I think we can do better than that. Huge round of applause. Yes. Thank you so much to all of these projects and ideas. Please take the conversation with them beyond this room, collaborate with them, reach out to them, fund their ideas. And now to conclude this segment and share her reflections, I'm so happy to invite Erica Carol Ogunko on stage from the UN Office of the High Representative for the Least Developed Countries and Small Island States to share her thoughts. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. This has been an amazing morning, so inspiring, a lot of reflections that I've made, a lot of really interesting projects and pitches that we've heard, and I look forward to seeing how everything progresses. I represent the office that supports the least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states here at the UN. So that's 92 of the poorest and most vulnerable countries in the world. Many of whom are represented here today in various ways. We work with the international community in order to help build partnerships, facilitate cooperation, and foster innovation to promote sustainable development in these countries, as well as generally supporting these countries in their work here in New York. And so one way this happens at the UN is through major conferences and meetings. And there are several major conferences and meetings on the horizon, which may be of interest to some of you here. First, our office is coordinating the 3rd UN Conference on the Landlocked Developing Countries, which will take place in December of this year, and it's hosted by Botswana. The main discussions will focus on reducing the trade and connectivity challenges related to being a landlocked country, but there will be a civil society forum and a youth forum in the margins of the conference. The youth forum in particular will be an exciting space to watch or engage with, as there will be another intergenerational dialogue, storytelling through photo essays, and highlighting some innovations of LLDC youth entrepreneurs. So if you're interested in learning more about this conference and how you can potentially engage, I think it would be a great opportunity for many of you in this room. Please see me after this session. I'll give you my card and you can get in touch and we can talk it through. And so far there are no Afghan youth representatives coming, so we would love to try to figure out how to make that possible. 6 months later, in June 2025, Spain will host the 4th Financing for Development Conference, or FFD4. At that conference, among other things, we hope that member states will agree to some improvements on how developing countries can access affordable financing to support their sustainable development. The UN Foundation is really engaged with the civil society processes in preparation for this conference, so I highly recommend that you reach out to some of the UN Foundation colleagues here today, and they can put you in touch with the right colleagues to help you get involved in this process. And last but not least, as has been mentioned by others in this room today, there's the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, aka Beijing Plus 30, taking place here in New York in March 2025. It will review progress against the commitments made at the 4th conference in Beijing in 1995. Spoiler alert, no one country has achieved full legal equality for women and men, and that does not bode well for sustainable development of any country. So please do get in touch to figure out how you can get involved in the CSW, in the FFD4 conference, in LLDC3, or any other UN process. And just to conclude, as we move forward into the UN Summit for the Future and continue our work for gender equal futures, we should have the power to imagine, what if we get things right? And now we'll watch a brief animation by the UN Foundation showcasing 2 visions of the future for a young girl in Ethiopia answering that precise question. Following this video, I would like to invite Harshani Dharmadasa, Senior Director of Global Partnerships and Initiatives at the UN Foundation, to say a few closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Hey there, my name is Reem and I'm 18 and living my best life in Addis Ababa with my amazing mom. I love getting lost in books and binge watching movies. Rom-coms are my biggest love. They make my mom and me laugh so hard and brighten our days. My life's a wild balancing act of school, chores, and running the Gender Equality Club. Oh, and cannot forget chemistry. I'm totally obsessed with it. It's my vibe. I'm also really into this project called She for Climate. It's all about helping girls become leaders and standing up for our planet. You know what blows my mind? 70% of us in Ethiopia are under 30. And I am one of them, and I've got big dreams of becoming an environmentalist. I want to build my own NGO, helping girls and women with climate change, education, and equality. But my journey hasn't been easy. Climate change has taken a toll on our finances, making it harder to pay for my education. We moved to the city, away from our family, so I could go to a better school. One time I got the opportunity to go to a really good high school, but I couldn't because of the extra expenses. We rely on crops from our relatives in the village, but the unpredictable weather has cut down the harvests. Our crops failed and we had to dip into our savings just to survive. It was heartbreaking. I worry about getting a job one day. Right now I'm 18 and I dream of better education and healthcare for everyone. But I worry about what will happen if we don't do anything. What if everything falls apart? What if leaders don't act for a better world? Our environment will deteriorate, schools and healthcare will fail, and poverty will spread. We'd be stuck in low-paying jobs, dealing with economic collapse. No matter how much we try, we are unable to change a thing for our children. But I'd like to think that we still have time. And imagine, what if we get it right? Imagine if world leaders today do the right thing and invest in good governance, social protection, clean power, and new technologies. To make my future bright, Ethiopia is doing just that. It's focusing on important goals like ending hunger, providing affordable and clean energy, and building sustainable infrastructure. By achieving these goals, my life and the lives of many people like me have changed for the better. When electricity reaches more homes, when every child has 3 meals a day, and everyone has access to basic services, we all dream bigger together. In 2044, at 38, I have my own NGO helping girls and women fight climate change. I mentor young girls, helping them become leaders. Ethiopia's economy is booming thanks to the huge leaps in innovation, climate tech, public transit, and internet. Our farmers use smart agriculture, ensuring food security for all. With the Sustainable Development Goals achieved, over 1.6 million people are out of poverty and our country's debt is slashed. My life and the lives of millions of others are transformed. This means more young people like me have a chance for a better future. More importantly, it means leaving a legacy worth inheriting for future generations. In 2100, my kids are all grown up, happy and chasing their dreams. With the right opportunities and people who care, Ethiopia is a beacon of resilience and innovation. This is the future that I want, a world where we can dream freely. United, we can solve big problems and create a world where everyone thrives and no generation is left behind. Let's act now for our common future.
Thanks so much, everyone. I know we were just running slightly over time, but that animation was beautiful, and it was actually animated by a young animator herself, Vidushi. So Vidushi, when you watch this, we love you. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to every young person who shared their story. Some of those stories will last with me for years to come. Aida, Nilab, thank you so much for sharing the courage to give those stories to us. And when those moments where we feel that it's hard and it's difficult, we'll always remember your stories. And I would love to give a shout out to my team who helped put together the learning agenda that Inez shared before. That brought together over 100,000 young people through our various platforms to imagine what if we got it right. So please, we encourage you to join us in this journey as we try to find answers to those questions. We have a platform that's called the Engine Room for the Future. My colleague Leela, if you would like to connect with her and join this Engine Room with us and join this movement, please connect with her. Again, thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the Summer of the Future, make connections, and let's think, plan, and act for a better future. Thank you.